Okay, so August camp is going to be biggest for who? Any particular player, unit, anything that you want to hear about as you try to gather as much video and information as possible for the next 4 weeks that you want to hear about?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to go back down to the QB and wide receiver play. Like I mentioned, there's some young guys at wide receiver that need to step up and play well for them. And there's some depth issues there, certainly. And then obviously you have you have a younger QB who's going to be making his first start, at Ohio State. So you want to see him, playing well first and foremost, but also maybe building some confidence with his receivers. That would be nice. And then I think certainly the last thing we talked about there was the secondary. You want to see good things out of Trick Bracey, Clarence Lewis, Jaden Mickey as a freshman, because we know that wide receiver isn't an issue at Ohio State, and that is a mismatch currently right now that I think most Notre Dame fans should be very concerned about. And so if Ohio State's going to be able to throw the football all over Notre Dame simply because their corners are a weak spot, it might not matter if the trenches are better, because we know CJ Stroud's going to be able to get the ball out. We know that guys like, Jackson Smith and Jigba and Marvin Harrison Jr. and guys and those types of players are going to be able to make plays on the outside. So certainly maybe Isaiah Foskey and Jason Adamalola and the Notre Dame offensive line can take over the game to an extent. But I think we've seen in college football over the last 5 to 7 years that when you have the skill position talent like Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, Georgia, those kind of programs can produce. Sometimes it doesn't matter if the trenches are better these days, because those players are just going to elevate your program more so than what Notre Dame has been able to do over the last 5 to 7 years. And maybe that's why they haven't gotten over that hump.
Yeah, the formula seems to be that while you're not going to run it 50 times and throw it 5, the run heavy, keep Stroud on the sideline. But an offensive line that should be one of the best in the nation, and a defense that's loaded with talent but unproven for the most part and didn't fare too well last year. And maybe you get a 250-yard rushing attack type of game and throw it 18 to 22 times effectively. And then on the flip side, as you mentioned, it's a lot to ask for those guys to get home consistently, because we're looking at elite versus elite defensive line for Notre Dame, offensive line for Ohio State, both 3 to 5 of the best at their positions in the country. So, but to play over their heads on the defensive front and overwhelm an elite offensive line and at least make it difficult for Stroud. So we've got our buddy Will, big Notre Dame fan, is excited to see Jalen Sneed and would like your thoughts on Sneed.
Yeah, he's one of those, young, talented linebackers that I mentioned earlier, that are coming in there. He's part of a really, really dynamic linebacker class in 2022. I'm not sure he's ready to contribute as a freshman. I think there's some weight gain there. I think he came in at like 6'1", 198, which, he has elite speed for that spot. So maybe there's, sort of a niche role that he can have, but with returning all the guys that they're returning. We saw last year, even with an injury to Maris Leofau, Prince Colley, who won the Buckus Award as the top linebacker in the entire country coming in, he barely saw the field. And I know it's kind of apples to oranges. You just never know how players are gonna, contribute year one, just, how they fare in fall camp, so on and so forth. But I'd be surprised if we saw him on the field too much, specifically early on. But very, very talented, and a kid that I expect to be a very, really good player, during his career at Notre Dame.